Hello and welcome to Stuart Saturday Live with me, your hostess, Andrea, the 17th century lady. Well, we're already on episode 6 of season 2, and today our special guest will be Dr. Mark Shearwood. He'll be with us a bit later on. Well, I'm really excited because we're only 3 weeks away from our inaugural Stuart History Festival. Dr. Erica Canella, Dr. Mark Turnbull, and I have been working pretty much daily for months to bring this festival together. And this is from earlier in the week when we were interviewed by Philippa Lacey Brewell from British History Tours. And that's out now. So if you look on YouTube or on social media, you'll see that the link to that interview is now available. Well, there is so much involved in organizing something like this, and it's been both rewarding and challenging. And I have to say, I've grown very fond of Erica and Mark, and I'm so pleased to see what we've achieved in so short a time working on this. And I'm grateful and honored to have this wonderful group of historians taking part in this inaugural lineup. As you can see here, I mean, we have Gareth Russell, Dr. Isabella Rosner, Dr. Jonathan Healy, Mark Turnbull, Dr. Stephen K. Roberts, Justine Brown, who was our previous Stuart Saturday Live guest, Dr. Mark Shearwood, J.D. Davies, and Dr. Erica Canella. And so it's really amazing, everything it's coming together. And I will be in a panel session with Justine Brown for Stuart's Sex and Scandal, Over a Century of Passion. And in this session, we will discuss various of some of the most scandalous marital liaisons, alliances and relationships in Stuart Britain, focusing in particular on the histories of James VI and first, Charles II and James II. So if you missed that last episode of Stuart Saturday Live, which was a restoration special, you won't miss it for long if you just go to hop on over to the YouTube channel and you'll be able to catch up. So this panel discussion will be on the Sunday, the 6th, and it will be moderated by one of our previous guests, historian Gareth Russell. So it's quite exciting, but I'm also pleased to announce that the festival will be working with Scripthaven, a local independent bookshop in Worcester, located only a 2-minute walk away from our old palace venue. And I just had confirmation this week that our speakers' books have been stocked, so you'll be able to get a copy or more in person. And you'll also find some children's activities there at this bookshop that I've created, such as a maze, coloring pages, and a word search. And these will be a taste of what you'll get in my forthcoming children's book, the Super Stuarts Activity Book. At Scripthaven, I will also be performing some 17th century songs with my daughter, and we will also be reciting some selections from amazing Stuart-era authors such as John Donne, John Milton, Aphra Behn, among others. So depending on the weather, I will be out in front of Scripthaven or inside the shop itself. So it all depends on the English weather, right? Of course, we'll be in full 1660s attire, and this will be a free option, and I'd love to see you there. And we'll also have stickers. So for the festival, we have all kinds of tickets, so you can select a talk or two in person, and there's also an all Saturday ticket, all Sunday, the whole weekend ticket, or if you're not able to travel, or you live outside the UK, you can still join us by selecting the live stream option. So tickets are available at www.tickettailor.com/events/the Stuart History Festival. And I'd just like to mention briefly that one of the sponsors of the Stuart History Festival is none other than Orland Media, a family-run business, my family's business, and we produce, among other things, audiobooks. Last month, we released Death's Bright Angel by J.D. Davies, which is set in 1660 and features a host of well-known Stuart characters, including Charles II, Samuel Pepys, Rupert of the Rhine, and Aphra Behn. So why not join Matthew Quinton on this epic adventure? And it's narrated by my husband, Gavin Orland. And we have a little example, a little sample of it, which you can listen to now.
"Gentlemen," said my not much older but infinitely wiser self, "we will clear for action, if you please. Mr. Delacourt, we will signal to the association—" Just then, and only for a moment, I caught a glimpse of the splendid white and gold carving upon the French ship's sternpiece. A maid in armour being wafted to heaven by angels. So this was our foe, as recorded in the latest list of King Louis's men of war. The Jeanne d'Arc, new built at Toulon. In our tongue, the Joan of Arc. Well, we English had roasted the namesake, and now we would burn the ship named after her too. That said, I prayed that the Jeanne d'Arc was not commanded by either of the French naval captains, whom I knew well. Roger Comte d'Andelys was a good friend, who had served me in the disguise of a sailmaker's mate when he was in disgrace at the court of King Louis, whereas Gaspard, Seigneur de Montenoir, a knight of Malta, was a mortal enemy, a fanatic who had once attempted to convert me to Rome when I was in his power. I dismissed the thought. Roger was at his chateau in the valley of the Seine, trying to find a wife and fulminating against those rivals at court who had ensured he held no command at sea during this expedition. Montenoir, meanwhile, was supposed to have died aboard a great Danish man-of-war that I had fought some 6 months before, the Danes, like the French, having joined the war on the side of our Dutch enemies. But although there had been no word of Montenoir since, there was no confirmation of his death either, and while a part of me would gladly have fought the Seigneur de Montenoir once again, another part prayed fervently that such a truly malevolent and implacable enemy was indeed already dead. "Fighting sails, Mr. Urquhart!" I shouted. "Master gunner, cartridge and shot to the guns, half-pikes between decks, if you please. Case shot to the swivel guns. Loose the tackles, open the ports, thrust out the main battery." Our drummers beat to quarters, our trumpeters sounded our ship's challenge to its enemy, and the royal sceptre sailed into battle.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I sure had a wonderful time proof listening to the whole of that book, and it's really great to work on something that is also set in the 17th century, and it's just quite thrilling. And you can find that, get your own copy of that audiobook on Audible, and let me know if you enjoy it. So the period which we call Stuart Britain, which encompasses the years of 1603 to 1714, this period saw a great amount of change in almost every sphere of life. This change also extended to weaponry, and some of the greatest military leaders lived and fought during this time. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mark Shearwood, who is the author of 2 books, including The Perfection of Military Discipline, The Plug Bayonet, and the English Army, 1660 to 1705. Dr. Shearwood is a historian of identity, religion, loyalty, and the Glorious Revolution. With a lifelong interest in military history, he completed his master's degree at Leeds in 2018, focusing on the military of the late 17th and early 18th century, from the Monmouth Rebellion to the end of the Great Northern War. His PhD research focused on issues of religion and loyalty within the armies of James II and William III. Joining us live from my nearby town, Chesterfield, please welcome Dr. Mark Shearwood. Hello.
Thank you very much for having me. Hello there. Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And welcome to the show. I'd like to know what first got you interested in history?
I think I always have been, but I think mainly it was a history teacher when I started secondary school. I am dyslexic, and she was the first teacher that sort of enabled me to bring on my passions. So that was the first bit that started me getting into history, I would say.
Right. Oh, it's so nice to have a teacher who takes the time to help a student out. I had a very good experience with one teacher who thought I could be a historian, and I really appreciated that. So I can understand that very well. But I wonder, in terms of Stuart history, what about this period really captured your attention?
I think first it was a TV program of the 80s of By the Sword Divided, which is set during the English Civil War. I grew up in Shropshire near Ludlow Castle, which played an important, well, played in the Civil War. And that's when my interest started. But it grew, the more I read into it, the more I suddenly found that I got interested, certainly in James II, thinking he's a very maligned monarch and quite a misunderstood monarch. So it was those two things combined that brought me into the Stuarts, and then sort of my interest sort of then expanded both backwards and then forwards through to the later Stuarts as well.
I see. Well, that's great. I mean, I think James II is a very interesting subject. Going briefly back, you said you grew up in Shropshire. I also lived in Shropshire for a few years. We lived in a hamlet called Clungunford. I don't know if you've been there, but it's near Craven Arms, which is near Ludlow.
Yes, I don't know it very well, but I do know it, and I have been through it on a number of occasions. So
yeah, it's lovely. It's very pastoral, and they had a wonderful tea room on the corner. I think that building dated from the 17th century, so we used to go there quite often. But the whole area is just full of history. I mean, there's Stokesay Castle with that amazing Stuart-era gatehouse. I think it's yellow and with the beautiful,
Yes, it's in its true colours of yellow and black rather than white and black.
It's really striking.
It is. Most houses in Shropshire were yellow and black and not white and black.
Brilliant.
So there's also a beautiful church close to Stokesay where they have a coat of arms to William III. And when they took it off in the late 1800s to redecorate and to repair the church, they noticed on the other side there is the coat of arms to James II. So they believe at the time that the vicar at the time was probably still a Jacobite supporter, and depending on whether he knew who was in the church or not, they turned it from one side to the other.
Wow, that's quite something. Wow. There's in your book, The Perfection of Military Discipline, the Plug Bayonet, and the English Army, 1660 to 1705. You said that there are some myths that keep being retold. Would you please tell us about some of these, and what kind of myths would you like to stamp out today?
Certainly. The two main ones, I guess, is the first one is a lot of historians, and there is a couple of quotes by famous military historians, that the plug bayonet was sort of the back end of military history and a dead end version of technology. Whereas in actual fact, when you look at it, that they started introducing it in the 1660s, it carried on being in use until the late 1690s, very early, and to some cases the very early 1700s. But before the plug bayonet was invented, you either had troops that were offensive, that carried muskets, or defensive, that carried pikes. But the plug bayonet allowed all troops to be both these roles. And without the plug bayonet, we wouldn't have then moved on to the more modern socket bayonet that comes in the 1700s, which effectively never changed its form from the 1700s almost to the early 1800s. So rather than being sort of a dead-end military technology, it was the forerunner and instigated everything else. The second bit is at the Battle of Killiecrankie, Hugh Mackay, who was the government commander who lost the battle, he put one of the reasons down to being the fact that once you obviously fit the plug bayonet, because it goes into the end of the musket, you can't fire your musket. And he sold this as a reason behind why his forces lost. But it was just him covering his own, or the actions of his troops. Because 3 years later, he actually writes a drill manual applauding the plug bayonet and showing all its uses and instructing all troops should be armed with it. So he obviously wasn't that upset with the bayonet. And later, military excavations of the site at Killiecrankie have proved the amount of firepower that the British Army did fire at the time. So they know that they carried on firing it. But these two things together have sort of given it a bad reputation as far as military equipment goes, when in my view it sort of enables troops to become fully offensive and defensive and allows for the dropping of the pike and for all troops just to be purely armed with muskets.
Wow. Yeah. I'm afraid I'm not a very knowledgeable about military history, so I'm going to ask you to talk much more about the topics today, as I can't really contribute as much. But I would like to point out that this is Mark's book, and as you can see, it's quite beautifully made. It's published by Helion and Company. It's part of the Century of the Soldier, 1618 to 1721 range. And I have to say, it's jam-packed full of information. I mean, if you love military history, you should get this book because it has everything. I mean, they're in the back, like War Office, establishment of guards and garrisons, and names of units and details, how many officers, you've even listed the musicians here in the unit. And it's just an incredible amount of information, which will be very handy for anyone who's researching the period. And full color drawings. It's just full of information. And so, yeah, definitely worth getting if you love history. Yeah, I've learned a lot. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I'd like to talk about the changes in the Stuart Army over the period, if we may.
Certainly. So when under Charles II, because of the Civil War and because of the fear of a standing army and sort of the parliamentarian army, regiments were kept into small numbers of regiments. They were paid for by the king and they were effectively his own household guard. And they tended to be split into individual companies, and they would guard in all over the country. When James II comes in, obviously within months of him starting his reign, you end up with the Monmouth Rebellion, which, although it's put down very quickly, James orders a large number of regiments to be raised to fight the rebellion. But what James also does is he professionalizes the English army. So he arranges a series of summer camps on Hounslow Heath, which is sort of 15 miles outside of London. These run generally between May and August each year. And in reality, he does something that today we would know as combined arms training. So cavalry, the artillery, and the infantry would all fight together and would all train together. So either in small numbers or in large numbers, and they would recreate battles, and the public would come and watch. Every day, sort of the wealthy and the good of London would come out on their carriages, have picnics on the banks overlooking Hounslow Heath, and they would watch the equivalent of either Trooping the Colour, as has happened today, or they would watch battles being put forward with the troops training and learning how to fight together. He also tried to arrange for the army to be quartered all in one place as far as possible, which allowed the units to work together on a far more closer basis. Although, as happened in later times, army officers tended to spend as little possible time with their units as they could, and that was one of the things that James wanted to try and change, which the army officers didn't necessarily like. There were a number of them that handed their commissions in because they believed that they didn't want to spend the summer on Hounslow Heath training when they could be far better sort of walking the streets and parading sort of down sort of London and living high life. So that was probably the main thing that he'd done. Previously, James had modernized the English Navy, and when he became king, he tried to do exactly the same to the army.
Wow. And there's a lot of information, well, a lot of gossip, I suppose, in Samuel Pepys's diaries about James. And I suppose when James was Duke of York, Pepys worked pretty much under him. And sometimes, I suppose, when we talk about him being a bit maligned, there is a thing where he did have his work suffer somewhat when he was preoccupied with the social situations. I think perhaps we can say that's, with his relationships. Yes. So
yes, definitely yes. It was the case that there's no doubt that while James was trying to modernize, it was also seen by his opponents as, if you're bringing 14,000 troops to within 14 miles of the city and showing off their military prowess, you can either view it as a celebration or you can view it as an intimidation. So depending on how you viewed James and whether you viewed him as a Catholic monarch that was looking after the best interests of the whole of the realm, or a Catholic monarch that wanted to become an absolute monarch in the image of Louis XIV of France, in that case, by sitting the army that close to London and showing off its military power, there were some people that viewed this as an act of oppression and possibly of a dictator, showing what would happen if you didn't follow his word and his law and his rules. So it certainly could be seen in both lights. He also allowed Catholic chapels to be built on Hounslow Heath, for the Catholic soldiers within his
Guess
army.
that didn't go down well with the
which-
Protestants.
No, there was a certain group of Protestants. While most people seem to be okay with it, those people that were vehemently anti-Catholic used it again as a stick to beat him with, the fact that he was allowing this to happen.
Wow. Well, so we've looked at the changes that occurred during this period. Let's focus now upon the weaponries. What kind of weapons were used during the late Stuart period? And what makes them different from those used earlier in the period?
In reality, there's not a lot that is overtly different. There's subtle differences. But if you took a soldier from the Cromwellian army and you put him with a soldier from Charles's or James II's army, there wouldn't be a great deal of difference. The muskets got lighter, the pikes got a little bit shorter, but the two sort of muskets that were involved, one is a matchlock musket, which uses a lit match, which is sort of a piece of effectively thick string that's impregnated, that burns very slowly to set off the powder. As you get through the period, more troops are armed with a flintlock musket, which is a musket that is the charge is discharged by striking a flint. But both were still in use up until sort of William takes over, and still in some parts during the 1690s. So a lot of it more is about the fact that the weapons become slightly lighter. They become more
easier to use, perhaps?
I guess they say that sort of, yes, slightly more easy to use, but also sort of more reliable, I would say. The types of firing mechanisms become stronger and they become more reliable. But overall, it's the biggest two differences is one is the bayonet that comes in, and the second one is that each regiment gets a company of grenadiers, which were the shock troops, which then use grenades, which are small round metal cylinders that are filled with powder. And these were used both in sort of attacking buildings, but also to attack sort of to use in normal combat. So, and then the other thing, as I said, is the training gets far better. You would find back in sort of Charles I's times, when soldiers weren't engaged, most of the time they were engaged in military affairs. They were sort of trying to like look after themselves, work to feed themselves. Whereas under James II, the army becomes more of one cohesive unit with better training, which allows, in theory, allows the army to be trained better and to work better together.
I see. That's very interesting. Oh, we can't talk about anything with the Stuarts unless and not mention how big a year it is for the period. I mean, it's the 400th anniversary of James I or sixth death in 1625, but there's also the 340th anniversary of the Monmouth Rebellion this year. And here's one of my favorite paintings of the Duke of Monmouth, which is now in the National Portrait Gallery and was done by Jan van Wyck. By the way, for those listening and watching, my article, The Monmouth Rebellion Explained, a Tragic Episode in Stuart Britain, is now available on the Art UK website. Now, Mark, I read that you're a rebellion tour guide. That sounds amazing. Could you please tell us about this? What's that about?
Yes, unfortunately, I've only done a couple. I worked for her since ceased trading, but it was a beautiful opportunity to spend 3 days based out of Taunton, and taking interested people around the battlefield sites. We started off down where Duke of Monmouth lands. And although obviously the town has grown a lot since, it's interesting to get people to actually stand where he comes ashore.
Yeah.
And then move through to Bridport, which was it's about 8-9 miles away, where the first meeting between his troops and the Dorset militia happened. We then moved up to the town of Coynton, which is always prides itself on being the most rebellious town in England because it had the most number of volunteers for Monmouth's army.
Right.
But spending 3 days with, say, very interested history buffs, and then we moved on through to Bridgewater, and there's a wonderful museum there called the Blake's Museum, which is a private museum run by some fantastic volunteers. So which covers the whole of the history of Bridgewater, but has got a beautiful Monmouth section.
Yes.
And
I went there as well. It is gorgeous, and I really recommend everyone who loves Stuart history, please go down there. It is well worth it. Yeah,
it is indeed. It's one of those places that quite often gets missed because it's in a small side street. But it is a beautiful museum. And then we went on to Western Zoyland to walk the battlefields. Luckily, the 2 times I've done it, the weather has been sunny and shiny.
That's good.
So, and the church there has a small museum inside the church. It was used to house most of the rebels that were captured immediately following the battle.
I found that exhibition or museum display very moving. I went there some years ago when I was researching for my novel of the Duke of Monmouth. But it's incredible how much history is still very visible in that area. It's tangible history. But I don't think you did what I did. I got lost. I got lost on the battlefield. I couldn't find my way. And I had to ask my husband to come and rescue me because I couldn't find anywhere.
I will freely admit, the first time I went there, I did exactly the same.
Oh yes, so it's not just me.
No,
Okay.
no. The first time I did it, I went down the wrong track, and I ended up sort of completely in the wrong direction. So I have been there a whole number of times. My wife she's quite used to it now, but every time we go down to Cornwall, we end up pulling off the motorway and going to have a look. I think it took me 4 or 5 attempts to get to it where the church was open. I think the first 3 or 4 occasions the church was closed when we went past. So there's also a beautiful museum inside Taunton Castle as well, which has a lovely section and has some really nice artifacts from both the rebellion and from around the time of the rebellion.
Yes. And they currently have this amazing exhibition to coincide with the anniversary of Monmouth's Rebellion. So, I mean, it was great, just to go to that museum. But right now, I think it's on until mid-July. I can't remember for sure, but it's definitely worth going. So if you can head back down there soon, I'm sure you'll love the exhibition as well.
Yes, I'm sure I will. Yes, personally, it's the individual stories is the ones that talking about the whole rebellion is really nice, but it's always nice to talk about the individual stories, which is something that the museum does very well, of the individual people that get caught up in the rebellion.
Yeah,
and the
I
impact,
agree.
obviously, of the bloody assizes that happens afterwards.
Yeah, it was just truly ghastly. Some of the punishments, they were quite draconian. The punishments that were meted out during what was then called the bloody assizes. Yes. And what do you think is the legacy of that rebellion? And what do you think is so important about it?
I think mainly it is just down the fact that it shows, I suppose, the legacy, you can still almost feel it down in the southwest to this day. There's lots of still feeling about it. It is a very much ingrained into socially the social memory of people in that area. I don't necessarily think across the country, but certainly in that area. I think more importantly, the impact that it had on James II, I think we see through the majority of his reign. And I think William of Orange, who obviously didn't support the Duke of Monmouth, but allowed him to leave, I think uses that to feed his own ambition and to feed his own objectives and his own outcome. 3 years later in 88, when obviously he comes and lands with a completely different force. There's no doubt that the Duke of Monmouth was naive in believing that he could take the country or become king with the small force that he landed with. And I think William definitely doesn't make that mistake 3 years later.
No. And I think it's good to point out that the Duke of Monmouth was known for caring for his troops, which I believe he's more known for that. He did genuinely care about their welfare. So I find that quite interesting. And he was also a pretty competent leader. But I believe he was just quite malleable to those around him following the death of his father, Charles II, and just made very poor decisions as a result. That's just my opinion. So,
yes, I think there is no doubt that later research has proven that 3 of the people that he thought he was relying on for the information in England, 2 of them was actually the same person, just writing under different names. And the 3rd person was in the employment of the other person. So therefore he thought he had this independently sort of chain of informers, when in actual fact they were all working together. And those are things that he wouldn't necessarily have been able to find out about.
Right. I see. 3 years later, after Monmouth Rebellion in 1685, was the so-called Glorious Revolution. And would you like to tell us about this and why it's significant, and whether or not you agree with this Glorious Revolution title?
Certainly. So it is, to me, it's one of the most significant events of our history. If we take the aftermath was not foreseen, intended at the time at all. So Williams had no idea of what the aftermath would actually be, and it was certainly different from what he wanted. But when we look at it, we end up with a constitutional monarchy. We end up with effectively a free parliament, both as a result of the Glorious Revolution. So, however, I really dislike the term of the Glorious Revolution, because it was not intended to be a revolution, and it certainly wasn't glorious for those people that were involved with it at the time. As we all know, the basic history is in June 1688, James II has a legitimate son, which allows for a prospect of a Catholic dynasty, which is the point where 7 members that were all members of either Parliament or the Lords write a letter to William asking him to invade England to protect the English Protestants. It's a beautiful story, and a couple of miles away from where I am is a house called Revolution House, which used to be the pub called the Cock and Pie Knot, where two of the seven people, along with a third person, so you have the Earl of Devonshire, the Earl of Denby meeting there after a hunting trip during a thunderstorm, meet there with a third person, John Darcy, and plan the supposed plot to bring William over. And in Hardwick Hall, which I know that you know very well, in the foyer is a chair called the Revolution Chair, which the Earl of Devonshire apparently sat at. It's a beautiful story. However, as quite often, facts don't always agree with the stories, because William had been planning the invasion at least a year before James II's son.
Very interesting. Yeah. Wow.
He had been organizing troops from allied nations to take over positions where Dutch troops were, so those Dutch troops could be brought back into Holland then to come over in the invasion. He had also made agreement with Pope Innocent XI, allowing him to take the throne of England from James II. Which may seem strange that you have a Protestant king, or ruler, as in William II, going to the Pope asking permission to overthrow another Catholic ruler. But at this time, the papacy wasn't on the best of terms with France. They were both vying for land, and William had other allies, including the Habsburg Empire, that were Catholic. So he wanted to make sure that he didn't upset his other Catholic allies in his fight against Louis XIV of France. So the Pope issues a bull allowing William to do it on the understanding that he's purely there to secure the succession rights of his wife Mary, who's James II's eldest daughter, and not to subjugate the English Catholic population. So the whole idea of James coming over on his white steed to be the protector of English Protestant faith and the English Protestant Church is a beautiful story, but William had no intention of doing it. He had more Catholics in his army than James had in his. The Dutch army was not a purely Catholic army, a Protestant army rather. Catholics were allowed to join. The only thing that William stipulated is that you had to swear loyalty to him or to the Dutch state. It didn't matter about what religion you were. So our understanding of these events is down to 200 plus years of, or now 300 plus years of effectively Whig propaganda. In 1988, on the tricentenary, Parliament holds a sitting based on the Glorious Revolution, and Margaret Thatcher comes up with saying effectively how that this was a peaceful revolution. It was a revolution of the people, when neither of those two things are true, but it sounds nice, and it's how our history remembers the fact, because most English people weren't involved in calling the revolution to start off with. So it was 7 members that did it without the permission authority of the government, and for most individual members of the English population, they saw no difference. They saw a foreign army come in and land, and then the English king flee the country.
And subsequently, as you say, with this sort of propaganda that has been continued by the victors, so to speak. There's this usage of grandiose terms, like these 7 men that you mentioned. They're given they're called the Immortal Seven, and so it's like these. It's sort of, it's sort of, maybe I should say, it's just excessive, perhaps.
Yes, I think it's all part of it's a lot of people used it in the following years, and certainly in the 18th century and early 19th century. The dialogue is that it was the Glorious Revolution because certainly in England, while there was some fighting, there wasn't pitched battles, and they were saying that, oh, this is the Glorious Revolution because compared with the American Revolution and the French Revolution, it was peaceful and there was no mass bloodshed or hysteria. But we tend to forget about what happens in Ireland and in Scotland.
Yes.
But as I said, the outcome that wasn't foreseen, because William wanted the English army to use in his fight against Louis XIV and the English Navy, or certainly the fear was that James, being Catholic, would side with France against Holland, as it had done in previously times.
I see.
William wanted control of that and England's resources, and he wanted his wife. He wanted the crown, whether he wanted it on his own, which I think is possibly the case, but he was forced to accept it with his wife as joint monarch. Although when they were together, the actual power was with William. Mary only had power when William wasn't there, so they weren't true joint monarchs. But as I said, the long-term outcome is certainly changes England into sort of, as a constitutional monarchy. So the outcome was good for the country. However, that wasn't something that I think that William ever intended.
I see. Yes, I think there was a bit of to and fro during the initial period when they came over, as he did not want to be sort of subservient to his wife, and so that's why this special arrangement was made, because although they were first cousins and they were both Stuarts, in his mother was a Stuart princess, and so on. That's the situation. They William and Mary had a very different situation because he did not find it natural to be under his wife. So that's why they had this arrangement that she wouldn't just be queen regnant on her own. They would have this diarchy. And I believe that's the only one that's existed in British history, if I'm not mistaken. So, all right. Let's see. Is Mark still with us? All right, let's see. We might. Sorry, we had a bit of a technical issue there, but welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks. Now let's see. I'd love to talk about dogs, if that's all right. Okay, I have this image here. I know that you love golden retrievers.
Yes.
Yes,
I have we
and
have a 4-year-old.
oh, that's lovely. I have a, well, soon to be 2. Yes, this is Bertie. So he is wonderful. And I was going to have him on camera, but the thing is he does have a tendency to bark, and we did get a delivery during this call. And so I'm glad that I didn't keep him in the room with me. But yes, I think that lots of people talk about the Stuarts and their love of hunting and their love of the Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. And I love those dogs too, of course. However, I think that had golden retrievers existed during the Stuart period, they would have been very popular with the Stuarts. What do you think?
No, I quite agree. I really do. Sort of, ours has changed our life completely. He's absolutely fantastic. He's currently downstairs at the moment. If he did come up, he always wants to try and get involved on any calls that I'm on. So,
Yes. Mine does that too.
However, he doesn't retrieve at all.
Oh. Ours is pretty good at retrieving, but not so good at dropping the ball or whatever he has retrieved. It turns into a tug of war.
He'll go and run to it, but he won't bring it back. It's so funny. It's something that he's never done, and he just refuses to do it, no matter how hard we try and train him to.
Oh, they do have that stubborn streak, which I think is quite similar to some of the Stuarts, to be honest. They have they had a reputation for that as well, a bit of stubbornness.
Oh, definitely. Yes. Yes. And I think that's one of the main problems with James II is the fact that he didn't listen to the correct advisors.
Yeah. Well, it's usually quite difficult, I think, in any situation. If you're surrounded by people giving you advice, it's sometimes difficult to know what the best course is. But yeah, I just like to think about what they would have liked, and these dogs are great. And I have to ask, all of my guests are asked this question: if you had a fantasy Stuart dinner, all right, I'd love to know, who would you invite, what would you serve, and who would you have sitting beside you?
Oh, I think there's a couple of people I definitely would like to invite. So 2 of them are 2 gentlemen called Roger Morris and Narcissus Luttrell, both who were diarists and historians. So they both had their fingers on the pulse. So I would love to have had both those 2 with me. I would like to have had William Sancroft, the Archbishop of Canterbury, because he is one of those bishops that James tried for sedition, but then refused to swear loyalty to William. So I would love to have talked to him. And William Bentinck, who was William's, if you like, close advisor and secretary. So, yeah, I think those are the people that, if you like, normal people, because obviously I'd love to sit next to James and to William. I'd love to ask William why he tends to write in 3 different languages in the same letter, because I've seen some of his letters that are in English, Dutch, and Latin, depending on what countries he's talking about. But as far as food, it's things that I think you still get today that I like. It's things like pike and carp and mutton. It's old dishes that I tend to like.
Yeah.
So I think it would have been more down those lines. But yes, I would love to have sat between Roger Morris and Narcissus Luttrell and listened to the 2 of those and try and understand how they got the amount of information that they did. Because I love reading through both of their collections of sort of works that they've done. And as a historian, I find them incredibly useful because it's information written down at the time. And it's such a wide range of information, from what happened locally to what's happening at the other side of the world. And everything in between.
Yeah.
So
I love the diaries from that period. They're full of information, and they shed such an amazing insight into the lives, everyday lives of normal people. And we can glean so much from all of that. It's wonderful.
Yes, I quite agree, and it's something that I constantly go back to because it's just a case of sort of reading. I said day-to-day lives of what happened on any particular day, and we're not talking about the major events. Quite often, it is very minor events that they're recording.
Yes, and I think Luttrell sometimes just has one line, if I remember correctly, and it could be mundane, or it could be something more significant, and yet it's so interesting. I love it. Yeah.
No, I quite agree. So yeah, those would be my those are my two favorite people. That obviously aren't people in power, that aren't sort of major players. I think everybody would like to. It'd be lovely to sit down with Churchill and with James II and William, but in reality, I think it's far more interesting to see about people that are like talking about everyday England and everyday Stuarts rather than.
Yes. So I'd like to know who your favorite or favorites are amongst the Stuart-era military leaders.
To me, there is sort of the Earl and I said Duke of Monmouth have to be up there. I think he's definitely one of them. Patrick Sarsfield, who was a gentleman who served under James, later served in Ireland and later served Louis XIV of France. He's probably one of the best cavalry commanders of the period. And I think he is another one of those greats that is quite often gets overlooked slightly. And then there's another gentleman, partly because his name, there's a gentleman called Theodulphus Oglethorpe.
What a name, yes.
who served under Charles and under James, and later swore loyalty to William. He went to James to France. Louis XIV at one stage got upset, shall we say, about the number of Protestants that were in James's palace, and they were all given the option that either they had to convert to Catholicism or leave. And Theodulphus was a Protestant. He was married to a Catholic, but he had sworn loyalty to James, so he follows James to Paris. But when he's given that option, he comes back and then swears loyalty to William, believing that his oath had been fulfilled to James. So he's a minor like military commander. But so my two favourites are Churchill and say Patrick Sarsfield. I think from different sides, I think they're the best ones that I have the most interest in.
Very nice. Wow, thank you so much. Now, do you have any more to talk about anything from the Stuart period?
I guess I am in the process of finishing off writing my next book.
Oh yes, I saw that you had a contract to write with the Helion about the 1688 campaign.
Yes, I'm doing the final edits at the moment, and as you probably realise, editing, well, certainly for me, editing is the least favourite bit of writing a book. But there is a lot of text written about the Glorious Revolution, but very little about the military aspects.
I see.
And so this book gives a day-to-day account from before, when the Armada gets ready to sail, all the way through to when effectively William II takes control. William III, sorry, takes control of the country. So it's done on There's some background to it other than that, but most of it is the military aspect of it, to try and balance some of the other histories, because there's always been a great debate about whether the events were a rebellion, whether they were a coup, or whether they're an invasion. When I taught at university and I taught the Glorious Revolution, it was one of those questions I always asked all my students at day one, and then on the last day of the course. It's like, have you changed your mind between the two? But he comes over with a fleet of over 500 ships. So Monmouth arrives with 3. William comes over with 50 plus warships and 500 ships in total. And a lot is made of the fact that he brings over a printing press with him. But he also brings over a mint so he can print money. And he brings over 20,000+ soldiers.
Wow.
So
and some of them were mercenaries, were they not? Some.
At this time, to be fair, it's difficult to tell about mercenaries. There were the Anglo-Scots and the Anglo-Dutch Brigade, which were 6 regiments that were raised in England that had fought for William, but technically were English and Scottish soldiers that William refused to allow back into England in 88, although he had done in 1685. There were some soldiers that effectively were from allied states to Holland, but the majority of them were Dutch troops that came over or were in service of the States General of Holland. So, but he certainly came over willing to engage the English army and to fight.
I see.
And this is the story that my new book will tell when it comes out, hopefully at the end of this year or early next year.
Awesome. And that's not part of the same series, is it? It's an independent.
No, this one will be in the same. This one is in the same series. It's with.
Oh, right.
It's in
the soldier, the Century of the Soldier series.
Yes. That's what the intention at the moment is for it. So.
Okay. Wow. Well, that sounds brilliant, and another wonderful addition to Stuart history. So good luck with everything. That's an enormous feat, I'm sure, as this must have been as well. But again, this is one of Mark's books. And I just want to say thank you so much, Mark, for spending some of your afternoon with us today. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome, and thank you for the invitation. It has been a real pleasure, and I must admit, I am looking forward to the festival in just over 3 weeks time.
3 weeks, I believe. It's coming down to it. Wow, it's amazing how close we are to that. And so I'll see you there, and we might even do a little live chat while we're there, and I'll see you then.
I certainly will. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
It's been brilliant being on. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that's great. Well, Dr. Shearwood is one of our speakers, and he will be joining us next month on the 5th and 6th of July at the Old Palace in Worcester for the Stuart History Festival. Yay! He will be joining Dr. J.D. Davies in a panel discussion on the Dutch Menace, Stuart Britain and the Dutch Republic. You can meet me, Dr. Shearwood, and our other speakers, and we will be happy to sign copies of our books for you after the sessions. And that's all for me. For now, I would like to thank Dr. Shearwood and my dear producer and director, Gavin of Orland Media. And I'd like to thank you, and I apologize for the earlier technical issue. Hopefully that's all sorted. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And I hope to see you next month at the Stuart History Festival. And until next time, don't forget to keep it Stuart. Goodbye.